Chancellor stood at the wide window of her command ship, watching distant explosions light up the darkness of space. Each flash meant another colony was dying. Each burst of fire meant thousands more of her people were gone forever. The bridge around her buzzed with quiet panic. Her officers moved between glowing displays, their long ears flat against their heads in fear. They had always been a peaceful people. They grew beautiful cities from living coral. They made medicine from flowers. They had never learned to make weapons of war. Now they were paying the price for that peace. "Chancellor," her communications officer called softly, "we are getting reports from the outer systems. They have taken 3 more colonies. They are moving toward the core worlds." Closed her large eyes and tried to push down the terror in her chest. They were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. They moved like a wave of hungry insects, eating everything in their path. Entire worlds disappeared into their ships, ground up to feed their endless swarm. "Any word from she asked, though she already knew the answer. The communications officer's ears drooped lower. "No, Chancellor. We sent the distress signal 3 days ago. They should have answered by now." His hands shook as she gripped the window frame. The Republic had been their allies for over 200 years. They were strong, with ships that could fight. They had always promised to protect the Confederation. Where were they now? "Send the signal again," she ordered. "Use the emergency channels. Tell them we need help immediately." The officer nodded and turned to his console. His fingers danced over the controls, sending their desperate message out into the void. The signal would travel through subspace, reaching in hours. But hours might be too long. Far away, in a small system near the edge of the galaxy, Admiral Sarah sat in the command chair of the UEF Defiance. The ship was new, still smelling of fresh metal and electronics. It was humanity's first real warship, built for their first journey into deep space. Had been studying star charts when the signal came through. Her communications officer, Lieutenant, looked confused as he stared at his screen. "Admiral," he said slowly, "I'm picking up some kind of distress call, but it's not in any language our computers know." Frowned Pleiad. The bridge speakers crackled with an alien voice, speaking in musical tones that rose and fell like singing. Even though they could not understand the words, everyone could hear the fear in that voice. "It's definitely a distress call," said. "The computer is trying to break down the language, but it will take time." Studied the signal data on her screen. Where did this come from? "That's the strange part, ma'am. According to the routing data, it was supposed to go somewhere else. Looks like it got bounced around by some subspace interference and ended up here by accident." The Admiral leaned back in her chair. Humanity was still new to space travel. Most alien species saw them as primitives from a dangerous world. Earth was what they called a planet so violent and harsh that most aliens could not believe anything intelligent could live there. But remembered her history. She remembered how humans had always helped each other in times of crisis. It did not matter if they were strangers. If someone was in trouble, you helped them. "How long before we can understand what they're saying?" she asked. Checked his screen. "Maybe 6 hours, ma'am. The computer is finding patterns in the language." Nodded. "Do we know where the signal came from?" "Yes, ma'am. About 47 light years from here. 3-day jump if we push the engines." The Admiral stood up and walked to the main display. It showed a map of known space, with tiny dots marking different alien civilizations. Humanity was just one small dot near the edge, ignored by most of the galaxy. "Ma'am," her tactical officer spoke up, "we don't have orders to leave our patrol route, and we don't even know who these aliens are." Stared at the display for a long moment. The smart thing would be to report this to Earth and wait for instructions. Let someone else make the decision. Let someone else take the risk. But that voice on the radio had been so full of fear. Someone out there was dying while she stood here thinking about protocol. "Plot a course," she ordered. "Maximum speed." The bridge crew exchanged glances. "Admiral," the tactical officer said carefully, "we don't know what we're flying into. This could be a trap, or a war between aliens that has nothing to do with us." Turned to face her crew. These were good people, volunteers all. They had signed up to explore space and represent humanity among the stars. They had not signed up to fight alien wars. "I know," she said quietly. "I know this might be dangerous. I know we might be making a mistake. But someone out there is asking for help. That's good enough for me." She looked at each of her officers. "If anyone objects, speak now. I won't think less of you." Silence filled the bridge. Then Lieutenant smiled. "When do we leave, ma'am?" Grinned back. "Right now. All departments prepare for jump to hyperspace." The Defiance turned away from its patrol route and pointed toward the coordinates of the distress signal. Its engines glowed brighter as power flowed through them. In the engineering section, Chief Petty Officer Murphy checked the readings and whistled low. "Full power," he muttered to his crew. "The old girl's going to run hot for 3 days straight. Good thing we built her tough." On the bridge, watched space stretch and twist as they entered hyperspace. Behind them, Earth and safety fell away into the distance. Ahead lay the unknown aliens in trouble, enemies they had never seen, and a war they did not understand. But Admiral Sarah was human, and humans had a saying that her grandmother had taught her long ago. When someone calls for help, you answer the call. It did not matter who they were or where they came from. It only mattered that they needed help. The message would take 6 more hours to decode completely, but already knew what it would say. Someone was in trouble. Someone needed saving. And the human fleet was coming. The fleet limped through space like wounded birds. Half their ships leaked atmosphere from torn hulls. Emergency lights flickered red across damaged bridges. Chancellor had moved her command to the last undamaged cruiser as they retreated toward their home system of Prime. "Sensors are detecting hyperspace signatures," called out the young sensor officer. His voice held the first hint of hope anyone had heard in days. Multiple contacts dropping out of jump space. Felt her heart skip a beat. Finally, the had come. Their beautiful bioships would sweep in with organic hulls that looked like giant flowers, carrying weapons that fired streams of pure energy. They were an old race, wise and powerful. They would know how to stop the... "Show me," she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the dark space ahead of their fleet. Bright flashes marked ships dropping out of hyperspace, but something was wrong. The shapes emerging from the light were not the graceful curves of vessels. These ships looked angry. They were all hard angles and flat surfaces, covered in thick armor plating. Rows of weapons stuck out from their hulls like spines on a predator. They looked less like ships and more like flying fortresses built for war. "Those are not vessels," whispered her tactical officer. Stared at the screen in growing confusion. The alien ships were larger than anything she had expected. They moved with purpose but not grace, forming battle lines with military precision. Each vessel bristled with more weapons than seemed reasonable. Who built ships that looked so violent? "Can you identify their design?" she asked. The tactical officer worked frantically at his console. "Negative, Chancellor. These ships are not in our database. The hull materials are unknown. The weapons signatures are unusual." "Unusual how?" "The energy readings are very high, Chancellor. Higher than weapons. Higher than anything in our records." A chill ran down spine. If these were not their allies, then who were they? And why were their weapons so powerful? "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. "They are trying to contact us." "Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, then a voice came through. But it was not speaking any language the computers recognized. The sounds were harsh and clipped, nothing like the musical tones of civilized species. "Universal translators are having difficulty," the communications officer reported. "The language structure is very unusual. It will take time to decode. Watched the unknown ships take formation around her fleet. They moved like hunters, covering all escape routes without seeming threatening. It was the behavior of experienced military forces, not explorers or diplomats. "Chancellor," her aide whispered, "what if these are not here to help us? What if they are here to finish what they started?" Before could answer, more ships began dropping out of hyperspace. But these were different. These were vessels, the nightmare bioships that looked like giant insects made of metal and bone. Dozens of them, moving in the flowing patterns of a hive mind. They had followed the fleet home. On the bridge of the UEF Defiance, Admiral watched her tactical display update with new contacts. The alien distress signal had led them to what was clearly a running battle. The peaceful ships they had come to help were damaged and fleeing. The pursuing vessels looked like something out of a horror story. "Those must be the hostiles," said Commander Hayes, her second in command. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Studied the enemy formation. The attacking ships moved strangely, all in perfect coordination like parts of a single organism. Their hulls were organic-looking, covered in what seemed like scales or chitin. They looked hungry. "Battle stations," she ordered. "All ships prepare for combat. Deploy an attack formation delta." Across the human fleet, klaxons sounded as crews rushed to their positions. Weapon systems powered up with deep humming sounds. Fighter squadrons launched from hangar bays, their pilots eager for action after 3 days of travel. "Admiral," Lieutenant called from communications. "I'm getting partial translation from the friendly ships. They call themselves the hostiles are something called the." Nodded. "Can you open a channel to the?" "Yes, ma'am. Translation is rough but functional." The main screen showed a tall, thin alien with large eyes and long ears. She looked terrified but was trying to maintain dignity. When she spoke, her voice was translated into flat, mechanical English. "Unknown vessels, I am Chancellor of the Confederation. We thank you for responding to our distress call, but we were expecting our allies. Who are you?" Stepped forward. "I am Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Fleet. We intercepted your distress signal and came to help." The alien's large eyes went even wider. "United Earth Fleet, you are from the Earth." Paused. She had heard that term before. Most alien species considered Earth too dangerous for intelligent life because of its violent nature, active geology, and aggressive animal life. They called it and its inhabitants. "Yes," said simply, "we are human." The Chancellor seemed to struggle with this information. "But your ships, your weapons, how did a primitive species build such vessels?" Felt a flash of irritation. Primitive. The Defiance represented centuries of human engineering and determination, but this was not the time for hurt feelings. "We can discuss that later," she said. "Right now, those ships are moving to attack. Do you have any tactical information about their capabilities?" The Chancellor looked between the human ships and the approaching fleet, could see the fear in her alien features. They had clearly been losing this fight for a long time. "They are unstoppable," the Chancellor said quietly. "They move as one mind, they adapt to our tactics instantly, they eat worlds." Nodded grimly. A hive mind enemy. That explained the coordinated movement. But humans had faced coordinated enemies before in their own brutal history. "Not anymore," said. "All ships, this is Admiral, we have civilians to protect and enemies to stop. You know what to do." The human fleet began to move forward, accelerating toward the ships with an eagerness that surprised the watching. These were not running away from the unstoppable enemy. They were charging straight at them. Chancellor watched in amazement and terror as the human vessels rushed toward certain death. Did they not understand what they faced? They had conquered dozens of species. They had weapons that could crack planets. But as she watched, she began to notice something odd about the human ships. They were not just charging blindly forward. They moved with a predatory grace, like pack hunters closing in on prey. Their weapon arrays tracked the vessels with mechanical precision. For the first time in months, Chancellor felt something other than despair. She felt curiosity. What kind of people were these, and what were they about to do to her ancient enemy? The first ships opened fire when the human fleet was still far away. Beams of sickly green energy lanced through space, followed by clouds of living projectiles that moved like angry wasps. It was the same attack pattern that had broken every other species that had faced. The watching from their damaged ships expected to see the human vessels destroyed instantly. Instead, they watched something impossible happen. The human ships scattered like startled birds, but not in panic. They moved in coordinated groups, dancing between the incoming fire with moves that seemed to ignore physics. Some ships spun end over end while still firing their weapons. Others dove straight down relative to the battle plane, using 3 dimensions like fish swimming through water. "How are they moving like that?" Chancellor whispered. Her tactical officer checked his readings twice before answering. "Chancellor, those ships are pulling acceleration forces that would kill our crews instantly. The gravitational stress should crush anyone aboard those vessels." Stared at the display. "Are you saying the crews are already dead?" "No, Chancellor, they are still fighting. Somehow they are surviving forces that would our bones." The human ships reached firing range, and the space battle became something beyond the understanding of warfare. Human weapons fired continuous streams of energy and solid projectiles, but they did not stop there. Fighters launched from the larger ships and dove directly into the formations, firing at point-blank range before spinning away. But what shocked the most was what the humans did when their ships were damaged. Instead of retreating for repairs, damaged human vessels accelerated toward the enemy even faster. One human destroyer, trailing atmosphere and with half its weapons gone, rammed directly into a cruiser. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire, but the human ship had taken the larger enemy vessel with it. "They are using their ships as weapons," the tactical officer said in disbelief. "They deliberately destroyed their own vessel to damage the enemy." Over the radio, they could hear human communications as their translators worked to decode the language. What they heard made no sense to their peaceful minds. Fox 2, target destroyed," came one voice filled with excitement. "Nice shot, Murphy, I owe you dinner," laughed another. "All units, this is Viper Squadron. We're going in for another pass. Who wants to race me to the big ugly one?" The humans were laughing. In the middle of a deadly space battle against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy, they were laughing and joking like children playing a game. The hive mind had never experienced anything like this. For millions of years, they had faced species that fought with logic and precision. When those species were losing, they retreated to save their forces. When they surrendered. The humans did neither. When a human ship was surrounded by 3 vessels, it did not try to escape. Instead, it targeted the largest enemy ship and accelerated straight at it, firing every weapon it had. When human pilots were outnumbered, they did not fall back. They called for help and dove deeper into the fight. Colonel Torres led the human marine boarding parties from his assault ship. The colonel was a big man with scars on his face and eyes that had seen too much war. He watched the tactical display as his marines prepared for the most dangerous part of any space battle boarding enemy ships. "Listen up," he told his troops over the comm. "These bug ships are full of hostiles that want to eat our new alien friends. We're going to board their vessels, plant charges, and blow them from the inside. Questions?" Sergeant Williams raised her hand. "Sir, intelligence says these ships might have thousands of enemies aboard. We're only taking 40 Marines per ship." Torres grinned. "That seems fair. Any other questions?" The Marines looked at each other and smiled. They had trained for this their entire careers. Finally, they had a chance to do what humans did best: fight impossible odds and win anyway. The first boarding action began when the assault ship UEF Hammer latched onto a damaged vessel. Cutting torches burned through the alien hull, while Marines in powered armor waited in the airlock. "Hull breach in 10 seconds," came the announcement. "Marines prepare for entry." The airlock doors opened, and the Marines poured into the alien ship. What they found inside was like a nightmare made real. The corridors were organic tunnels lined with what looked like bones and teeth. Strange fluids dripped from the walls. The air was thick with the smell of decay. But the Marines had trained for this. They moved in small groups, covering each other as they fought deeper into the ship. The warriors they faced were like giant insects, with claws and mandibles that could cut through metal. But human weapons fired bullets that could punch through armor, and human soldiers fought with a ferocity that the hive mind could not understand. "Contact front," shouted Corporal Johnson as a group of warriors charged down the corridor. The Marines opened fire, their weapons lighting up the dark tunnel with muzzle flashes. When his rifle ran empty, Johnson drew his sidearm. When that ran dry, he pulled out a combat knife. The other Marines watched in amazement as the corporal fought a creature twice his size with nothing but a blade and determination. "Johnson's gone crazy again," laughed Williams as she reloaded. "Someone help him before he tries to arm wrestle the whole ship." The Marines fought their way to the ship's power core, planted their explosives, and fought their way out again. As they ran for the exit, they realized what was happening and sent every warrior on the ship to stop them. The running battle through the organic corridors was chaos. Marines fired over their shoulders as they ran. They threw grenades around corners and dove through closing blast doors. Some were wounded, but none were left behind. Humans had a rule: no one gets left behind. They made it back to the Hammer just as the charges detonated. The ship shuddered and broke apart, its organic hull splitting open like a cracked egg. Watching from her command ship, Chancellor saw 5 more vessels suffer the same fate. The humans were boarding heavily defended enemy ships for the sole purpose of destroying them from within. It was the most insane military tactic she had ever witnessed. It was also working. The hive mind was learning something it had never experienced in millions of years of conquest. For the first time since they began expanding across the galaxy, they were afraid. They had come to play. The hive mind was learning to feel fear, and it did not like the experience. For 3 hours, the space battle had raged around Prime. The swarm had started with overwhelming numbers, just as they always did. But now, half their ships were destroyed or drifting dead in space. Worse, the surviving vessels were no longer moving with perfect coordination. The hive mind was confused. These humans fought like no species it had ever encountered. When tactics adapted to counter human strategies, the humans simply changed everything they were doing. They treated warfare not like a science with rules to follow, but like an art form to be created moment by moment. Human fighter pilots flew impossible patterns that ignored every rule of space combat. Human Marines boarded ships that should have been too dangerous to approach. Human captains rammed their vessels into enemies when conventional weapons were not enough. Most disturbing to the collective consciousness, the humans seemed to enjoy the fighting. The hive mind could hear their communications, filled with laughter and jokes and challenges between their warriors. They were not afraid. They were having fun. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display update with each enemy ship destroyed. Her fleet had taken damage, but nothing critical. More importantly, they had broken the formation and scattered their attack. "Admiral," Commander Hayes reported, "long-range sensors are detecting a massive contact dropping out of hyperspace. It's huge." Looked at the display as a new signature appeared. The contact was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. As it moved closer, the ship's sensors began to resolve details of its structure. "My God," Hayes whispered, "it's a living ship." The command vessel was unlike anything in human experience. Its hull was organic, looking like a massive sea creature covered in armor plates. Smaller ships moved in and out of openings along its sides like pilot fish around a whale. The weapons it carried could be seen as growths along its surface, each one larger than most human vessels. That's their flagship, realized. Take out that ship and we break their coordination. Admiral, her tactical officer said carefully, that vessel our entire fleet. Its weapons could destroy us from a distance we can't even reach. Studied the readings. The officer was right. In a straight fight, the human fleet would be and destroyed before they could do significant damage. But Admiral Sarah was human, and humans specialized in fights that could not be won by conventional means. Colonel Tors, she said into her comm, I have a job for your Marines. On his assault ship, Tors looked at the massive vessel through his viewport. It was the largest enemy ship he had ever seen, covered in weapons and swarming with smaller craft. Any sane military officer would call it impossible to assault. Tors grinned. Impossible was his favorite kind of mission. What do you need, Admiral? He asked. I need you to board that ship and find whatever runs their hive mind. If we can cut off their central control, the rest of their fleet should fall apart. Tors nodded. Understood. How do you want us to get aboard? Leave that to me. Just be ready when the door opens. Turn to her bridge crew. All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. Make them angry enough to come after us. The human fleet opened fire on the massive vessel, their weapons making tiny flashes against its enormous hull. The damage was minimal, but it got the creature's attention. The command ship began to turn toward them, its weapons charging with sickly green light. Now comes the crazy part, muttered. Helm put us on a collision course with that ship, maximum speed. The bridge crew stared at her. Admiral, the helmsman asked. You heard me, ram that ship. Ma'am, that vessel is 50 times our size. We'll be destroyed on impact. Smiled, not if we do this right. Tors, are your Marines ready? Ready and waiting, Admiral. Good, prepare to launch all assault boats when we reach 2 kilometers. The Defiance accelerated toward the enemy flagship, with the rest of the human fleet following. The command ship fired its massive weapons, but had counted on the aliens' confusion. The beams missed, designed to hit ships trying to escape, not vessels charging straight at them. At 2 kilometers distance gave the order. Launch assault boats, all ships emergency turn to port, engines full reverse. 20 small assault craft launched from the human fleet and continued toward the ship at maximum speed. Behind them, the larger human vessels reversed thrust and turned away, barely avoiding the enemy's weapons fire. The hive mind realized what was happening a moment too late. The assault boats were too small and fast to target effectively, and they were already too close to stop. Colonel Tors rowed in the lead boat as they crashed through the organic hull of the command ship. The impact threw the Marines around like toys, but their armor protected them. Emergency lights flashed as they cut their way out of the wreckage and into the alien vessel. Welcome to the belly of the beast, Tors announced to his troops. 40 Marines, 1 hive mind. I like those odds. The interior of the command ship was a maze of organic tunnels and chambers. Everything was alive. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and strange fluids flowed through tubes that looked like veins. Worst of all, the Marines could feel intelligence watching them, a vast presence that filled every corner of the ship. They fought their way deeper into the vessel, facing warriors that seemed to know exactly where they were at every moment. But human tactics relied on more than surprise. They relied on determination, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever it took to complete the mission. When conventional weapons were not enough, the Marines used explosives. When explosives were not enough, they used their hands and knives. When they ran out of ammunition, they picked up alien weapons and learned to use them in seconds. The neural center should be at the core of the ship, Tors called over the sound of gunfire. Keep moving. They fought through miles of organic corridors, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. The hive mind threw everything it had at the human intruders, but 40 humans with a mission were proving unstoppable. Finally, they reached the center of the ship, a vast chamber filled with pulsing organic computers and neural networks. At the center of it all was the Queen Mind, the living brain that controlled the entire swarm. It was enormous, a creature that was part insect, part machine, part living computer. Its eyes fixed on Tors as he entered the chamber, and when it spoke, its voice filled his mind. It said, "You cannot destroy what has conquered 1,000 worlds." Tors pulled the pin from his last grenade and smiled. "Watch me." The explosion that killed the Queen Mind was felt throughout the command ship. Colonel Tors and his Marines died instantly, but their sacrifice tore the heart out of the hive mind that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Across the battlefield, every remaining vessel suddenly stopped moving in perfect formation. Individual ships began to drift aimlessly, their crews no longer connected to the central intelligence that had guided them. Some fired randomly at anything nearby. Others simply shut down completely. From the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral watched the enemy fleet fall apart like a machine with its power cut. Within minutes, the unstoppable swarm had become a collection of confused, leaderless ships that posed no threat to anyone. "All vessels," she announced to her fleet, "finish the stragglers, make sure none of them can regroup." The remaining human ships moved through the battlefield, destroying the disabled vessels one by one. It was not a battle anymore, it was cleanup. The enemy that had seemed so terrifying was now helpless without their hive mind to guide them. Chancellor watched from her damaged cruiser as the humans methodically eliminated the last of the forces. She still could not believe what she had witnessed. In 4 hours of combat, these had accomplished what her people's allies had failed to do in months of warfare. "Open a channel to the human flagship," she ordered. Admiral's face appeared on the main screen, looking tired but satisfied. Behind her, the human bridge crew was celebrating their victory with quiet professionalism. Admiral said, "I must speak with you. Can we meet in person?" Nodded, "Of course, Chancellor. My shuttle will dock with your ship in 30 minutes. An hour later, found herself in her private conference room, sitting across from the human admiral. Looked younger than had expected, with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore a simple uniform with no decoration except for a small pin that showed the Earth and Moon. "I need to understand," began. "Your people just sacrificed themselves to save a species they had never met before. Why?" Was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Chancellor, what would you do if you heard someone calling for help?" I would try to help them if I could do so safely." "What if it was not safe?" Paused. "Then I would try to find someone else who could help them safely." Smiled sadly. "And what if there was no one else?" The question hung in the air between them. Realized that this was the difference between her people and the humans. They would look for a safe way to help. The humans would help anyway, regardless of the danger to themselves. "Your people are different from us," said finally. "Yes, we are. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to fight back, and we learned that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to lose everything." Thought of Colonel Tors and his Marines, who had died to save people they had never met. Your soldiers knew they would not survive that mission. They knew it was possible, corrected, but they also knew it was necessary. The hive mind had to be stopped, and they were the only ones who could do it. "I do not understand how your people can be so willing to die for strangers." Leaned back in her chair. "Chancellor, let me ask you something. If your child was trapped in a burning building, would you run inside to save them?" "Of course." What if it was your neighbor's child? Yes, I think I would. What if it was a child you had never met? Was quiet for a long moment. I would want to, but. We do not have that but, said simply. A child in danger is a child in danger. It does not matter whose child it is. The Chancellor stared at this strange human who spoke of such things as if they were normal. Your people truly are, not because you are violent, but because you are willing to face death for others. Nodded. That is what makes us dangerous to our enemies. We do not fight for territory or resources or power. We fight to protect people who cannot protect themselves, and we will die before we let innocents suffer. Over the next several hours, they discussed many things, offered the humans advanced technology, trading rights, and a place on the Galactic Council. To her surprise, was not interested in most of it. We do not want territory, the Admiral said. Earth is our home and we are happy there. We do not need your technology, we prefer to build our own, and politics bore most of us. Then what do you want? Smiled. We want to know that if someone calls for help, they will be answered. We want to know that there are people watching for the monsters that hide in the dark. You want to be protectors. We want to be ready when protection is needed. 3 days later, Admiral stood in the communications center of Prime, speaking to leaders from across the galaxy. Word of the defeat had spread quickly, and many species wanted to understand how they had achieved such a victory. The Terran Intervention Fleet will be a joint force, explained to the assembled alien representatives. Humans will provide the military backbone, but we welcome volunteers from any species willing to stand against threats to galactic peace. Chancellor stood beside her, still amazed by these strange humans. The Confederation pledges our support. We will provide medical facilities, supply bases, and intelligence networks. One by one, other species agreed to support the new fleet. The peaceful races of the galaxy finally had guardians who understood that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be ready for war. After the meeting ended, walked with to the human admiral's shuttle. Your people have changed everything, said. The galaxy will never be the same. Looked up at the stars through the station's viewport. Good, change is needed. For too long, peaceful people have been helpless against those who would destroy them. That ends now. Are you not afraid that your people will become like the monsters you fight? Was quiet for a moment. Every day. But that is why we fight together with allies who remind us what we are protecting. That is why we always come home to Earth to remember where we came from. She turned to face the Chancellor. We are dangerous, never forget that. We are killers and warriors who come from a world that breeds predators, but we chose to be protectors instead of conquerors. That choice is what makes us human. As shuttle departed for the human fleet, watched it go with mixed feelings. The humans were terrifying in their capabilities and their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others. But they were also exactly what the galaxy needed. In the months that followed, news of the Terran Intervention Fleet spread across known space. Pirates found their ships surrounded by human vessels before they could attack merchant convoys. Aggressive species discovered that expansion by conquest was no longer safe. Peaceful worlds slept better knowing that if they called for help, someone would answer. They had come to the galaxy not as conquerors but as guardians, and the universe was safer for it.